Hi, Coach Laughlin. Thank you for making the time to meet with me. I appreciate your interest in sports psychology.
Thanks for arranging this meeting, Leah. To be honest with you, when my athletic trainer first mentioned reaching out, I was a bit skeptical.
Can you tell me why that is?
Well, I'm unsure of what sports psychology is exactly, and I don't know the types of services you would be able to provide my team and I. We have been having a great season so far, and I felt that the athletic trainer's recommendation to meet with a psychologist was a bit of a blow.
I'm so glad you brought that up. I don't want you to think of my services as an improvement to troubled areas, but more so a building block on things that are going well. You mentioned that you're having a strong season this far, which means there's a chance for better competition up ahead. I'm assuming that sectionals and beyond may be very successful for your team.
Absolutely.
While sports psychologists do offer resources to assist athletes and their team with difficulties in their play, there's also the ability to build on mental aspects of their competition. Are you open to hearing more?
Okay, I guess it couldn't hurt to learn more.
Let me tell you a little bit about myself first. I've been a clinical sports psychologist for about 5 years, working with a wide range of athletes, including high school, collegiate, and professionals, as well as the weekend warriors and those individuals that like to play on the weekends here and there. As a clinical sports psychologist, I have the training to diagnose and treat emotional disorders, which can include stress, anxiety, depression, or even eating disorders, amongst other things. We work with the athlete or team to overcome injury or fear of re-injury, or to prepare them for competition. Depending on the athlete or team's needs, goals will be developed in a collaborative effort. I've adopted cognitive behavioral orientation as the framework for my practice, which guides me to evaluate the athlete's cognitive process and their environment, both current and past, to understand their behavior.
How does evaluation begin?
My professional philosophy is to focus on the performance aspect instead of the counseling aspect. I like to sit down with individuals or teams and determine who they are as people. What are their values in regards to athletics, and what do they feel are important aspects of their activity? I feel it is important to listen to them and talk to them about their game plan. It is important for me to understand how they got into their sport and what they like and dislike about it. The likes and dislikes can include where they are right now or who they're playing with.
What do you do with that information?
By getting to know the team or individual athlete, I can begin to see if there's areas that I would be of use to them. For many athletes, this may be the first time they are challenged in their sport, or the level they are competing at has begun to cause more stress in their life. Outside factors may be causing stress in their activity, such as lack of support from family members, friends, or teammates.
You mentioned before that you're not necessarily trying to fix troubled areas, so how can you tell if your services are warranted?
Not every team or individual has troubles or difficulties exactly, but there are certainly areas that can be strengthened. With every team, even the best of them have areas that need improvement. Would you tell me about your team?
I'm the head coach of the New Jersey Running Club, an elite girls track program. The team is made up of about 35 high school girls, ranging from freshmen to seniors. Many of our athletes are returners from last year, but there are a handful of freshmen and some slightly inexperienced sophomores at the elite level. We won the USA Track and Field New Jersey team title last year, so that's the goal again this year.
And your coaching staff?
I'm the head coach, and I have 3 assistants.
And what's the dynamic like between you and your assistants?
We get along really well. We tend to always be on the same page as far as the athletes are concerned. I work more with the sprinters. One does distance, the other jumping, and the third throwing. I'm closer with the distance coach than the jumping and throwing coaches, but that's our coaching staff.
What is the dynamic like between your athletes and your assistants?
The girls absolutely love them. Although we give harder workouts, the girls are improving, dropping time tremendously, and setting new PRs. As far as running, I would say it goes for all of us. Although some days are difficult, results are being seen, which makes everyone happy. The throwing and jumping events have been more of a weakness this year due to a greater number of new girls joining our team in those areas.
You mentioned the team goal of winning the state title again this year. Have any other goals been set by either the coaching staff or athletes?
The girls are constantly setting goals for themselves, whether it's new PRs or winning a state title in their individual events. We sit down as a group in the beginning of every season, and every girl writes out a personal goal and a team goal.
That's great. That right there is an example of sports psychology.
Is it? I didn't even know that. Growing up, my coaches had us do that, and I loved the idea, so I passed it along to my kids.
So you spoke about the dynamic between you and your assistants and the girls. Can you tell me about how the girls interact with one another?
The girls get along really well, always encouraging each other and celebrating each other's accomplishments. Actually, earlier this season, we had a girl PR in a race with the help of her teammate. The teammate talked her through the entire race, pushing her to stay with her until the very end. It was so great, really, really exciting.
Has there been any controversy?
No, we haven't really had any issues. I would say that the biggest issue we've had is the girls focusing on themselves rather than the team.
Can you elaborate on that?
Girls are more focused on setting new PRs or participating in events that they know they will do well in, rather than participating in events that challenge them.
So we spoke about goal setting, which is a very common technique used in sports psychology. I like how your team does that in the beginning of the season, but have you ever reassessed it later on?
No, we set the goals in writing, but never really reassess only verbal communication about them later on.
That may be a great group bonding activity prior to sectionals. It can get the girls excited for the competition up ahead.
I like it, but would you still focus on individual and group goals?
Yes, you can definitely do that. You mentioned that the girls have been focused on themselves more than the team this year. So, although competition at this part of the season is more individual based, why don't you bring the focus back to the group as a whole?
What do you mean by that?
Well, you can have the winning state title be a group goal, and that can be your central focus for goal setting. But the team goal can have the athletes set individual goals that assist reaching that level of state title again this year.
Oh wow, I never thought about it that way. I understand that the sport's based off of individual success, but my assistants and I have really been struggling to bring the focus back to the team. I love this approach. I think the girls will really get into it.
Can you tell me about the physical conditioning your team performs?
Our team practices 5 days a week, 3 hours a day during competition season. That runs from the beginning of March until late June. Because of our elite status, training occurs throughout the year. We take a few weeks off in the summer and start back again in late July. Our training season runs throughout the entire year, with practices typically 1 day a week and at times twice.
I'm sure the same level of training isn't done every day.
No, during competition season, we do a workout with each running group once a week on the track and practice skills the other 3 to 4 days, depending on what day we compete. The workout is always 2 days prior to competition, with a lighter workout the day before. Distance works with distance, while sprinters work with sprinters. During the off-season, we lift and do skills training.
You mentioned skills training. Can you discuss their skill level?
Each athlete's different, meaning different expectations are set for each athlete. Obviously, the beginning of the competition season is used to set benchmarks, and from there we look to improve on those areas.
Do you feel that you have athletes on your team that have the skills to succeed but are not showing success?
Absolutely.
Why do you think that may be?
They just haven't put the work in to be successful.
How about athletes that put endless hours in but are still falling short?
Yeah, we do have a few girls like that.
And what do you think it is that's holding them back from succeeding?
We have one girl in particular that works her tail off and she performs so well at practice, but when it comes to competition, she tends to freeze. I think she thinks too much about what's going on.
What you have described is psychological readiness.
I didn't realize there was a term for overthinking.
Not so much overthinking, but the lack of preparing mentally for competition. What we have just discussed are the 3 areas that I feel are necessary to compete as an athlete: physical conditioning, skills training, and psychological readiness. Many people will use the term mental toughness to overcome a difficult situation, but it's more than that. The individual must be mentally prepared for the situation prior to it occurring to overcome and succeed.
We have discussed thinking about other things when she performs, but it hasn't worked for her.
I worked with an athlete similar to this in the past who struggled with her performance in practice and during competition. Although it was evident that she knew what she needed to do, her brain took over when it was time to perform. She was able to perform when others were not watching, but in front of a crowd or even a small group, she struggled. I would like to try out the same program I used with this runner on your athlete. The program focused on redirecting your brain to positive thoughts.
Do you think improving her performance is as easy as brain training?
I don't want to say it is easy, but mental training is definitely an area that needs to be addressed to develop the athlete as a whole. I'm a firm believer in treating the athlete as a whole, which is also known as the holistic approach. The athlete's environmental factors play a large role in their performance. This can include home life, school, friends, and beyond. Addressing all areas of the athlete helps to understand who they are and what areas of self need strengthening. Let's look at this chart for a moment. This is known as the performance pie chart. As you can see, there are 3 areas that balance the chart out to make them equal: skills training, physical conditioning, and psychological readiness. It is important to assess how much time is spent on each area to ensure equal balance. Without equal devotion to all areas, the pie is not symmetrical. Thus, the athlete is not fulfilling all areas needed to succeed and sets them off balance. Let's start with physical conditioning. How much time do you feel your athletes spend on physical conditioning?
The majority of our competitive season is focused on physical conditioning. I would say approximately 50 to 55% of time is spent on this area.
Great. How about skills training?
Skills training is a large focus in the off-season. We spend approximately 45% of our training time on skills training.
Okay, so that leaves about 5% of time on psychological readiness.
Yes, like I said, this isn't an area that we have really focused on. I recognize that there are mental aspects of athletics, but I guess I never really thought about incorporating training into preparation. How do you feel is the best way to do this?
Like everything involving your athletes, it starts from the top. As you know, you are the role models for your athletes, and they believe that you know what is best for them. Introducing the psychological aspect of athletics starts with you. Typically, preseason or early on in the season is the best time to introduce the idea of mental skills training to your athletes. In your scenario right now, we can prepare the skills for the postseason. Start with a pre-postseason preparation.
It sounds to me like we need to get the whole team on board. What do you think will be most effective, using an individualized or team approach?
You know your athletes best. If you feel it will be easy to introduce the whole team, we can start there. Otherwise, think of a few athletes you feel may benefit from these services and work with them for the time being. Yeah, that may work best. If we can get a few athletes on board, typically upperclassmen or captains, they can introduce the idea to their fellow teammates.
I am really starting to get excited about these techniques. Would you be able to show me an example of a skills training exercise?
Let's take the athlete you spoke about earlier that performs well at practice but freezes during competition. What events does she do?
Long and triple jump. Last year she was a state qualifier, but this year she's really in a slump.
There are a few techniques we could use with her. First, I would have her close her eyes and visualize the day she performed her best jump. This would include her warm-up routine, going through the motions of her jump, and then jumping into the pit. Visualizing a successful jump can help her to see that she is capable of succeeding. Although she has been in a slump this year, at one time she was doing well and jumping to her satisfaction. We need to help her to erase the thought of poor mechanics and bring back the thoughts of success.
I have a few pictures of her jumping from last year. Would they be helpful?
Yeah, they can be. We can even look at videos of Olympic athletes to match her mechanics with theirs. It's important to break down every aspect of her jump to be sure that she is confident and comfortable with her routine.
Speaking of routine, I know some of the girls are very superstitious about their warm-up. Do you think this plays a part as well?
Absolutely. It is important to have a strong warm-up routine that she can perform in the beginning of every practice and prior to every meet. Some individuals focus on eating a specific meal, wearing specific socks, or even doing their warm-up in a specific order. Whatever that may be, I can sit down with the athlete to determine what her ideal routine may be. Strengthening these areas may be helpful to improve her confidence levels.
That sounds simple enough.
It can be, but each athlete's routine may be different. We have to see what works best for each of them. Another technique that may be useful is self-talk. Many times, athletes get down on themselves and begin to think negatively about their performance. Instructional or motivational may be both be useful.
What's the difference?
With instructional, the athlete is focusing on the task at hand and using words or phrases related to their activity. Motivational, on the other hand, is pushing the athlete to succeed by increasing confidence and energy levels. What type of comments do you think this may include?
You're doing great?
What if the athlete is not doing great?
Well, does it matter? Isn't she just trying to boost her self-esteem?
Well, yes and no. You want the athlete to believe in what they're saying. So if the comment isn't convincing, then they're not going to believe it, and it's not going to change their mindset at all.
Okay, so how about you can do it?
I like that phrase better. The athlete knows that she is capable, so using a phrase that is better suited for her will help to drive her to succeed.
That does make sense. Am I capable of helping with the self-talk in any way?
Yes, having a constant motivational factor is very helpful to guide the athlete. They know that you are familiar with their training techniques, and all the time you spend together should help you to understand what is going on in her head. Working on these techniques during practice will give her the support she needs during competition. I would like to try something. Do you mind closing your eyes and repeating after me?
Okay.
I am strong.
I am strong.
I am confident.
I am confident.
I am going to succeed.
I am going to succeed.
I am determined and successful.
I am determined and successful.
I can achieve anything I want to succeed.
I can achieve anything I want to succeed.
How did these comments make you feel?
I was a little hesitant at first, but began to feel empowered as we went on.
Good. These are techniques that can be done with your team or an individual person.
Do you feel that most things would be done in a team environment, or is it more of an individual approach?
Well, it depends on the activity and the goals of each individual person. Many things can be done as a team or even a small group, but there are certain aspects that I could work with the individual athlete.
Pre-competition is certainly a time that stress and anxiety levels build, so I feel that my athletes would benefit at that time. What's your common practice?
I agree. Athletes find great benefit in using psychological techniques prior to competition, whether it is the day before or right up until they compete. Introducing techniques early on allows the athlete to feel for what they like and dislike and what works and doesn't. I've introduced these techniques at multiple times in an athlete's season. Like I mentioned, I typically like to introduce myself to the athletes prior to the season so we can get comfortable with one another. A group environment may work best at first, and if as the season progresses, individual athletes are in need of more one-on-one sessions, then that can be done as well. I would start out with a session a week, progress to more if need be. During competition season, one session may be plenty to accommodate their time constraints, but once I get to know the athletes, I'm open to giving at-home techniques for them to work on their own. The best we can do is introduce the techniques and then determine what is working and not working, and create a plan of improvement.
I'm okay with that.
Now close your eyes again for one moment and visualize your team. You mentioned that last year they won the state title. Open your eyes. Can you describe the first image that you associate with that?
There are a few that came to mind. The group that advanced last year was very motivated and encouraged one another to succeed. We were all very excited for one another, and the girls stood by each event that their teammates competed in. This was a huge motivation factor. My assistants and I also sat down with a few girls that really needed to push themselves a little harder. If they could guarantee points for us, we knew we would win. I would say it was a total team effort.
Good. Now think of this year's team. What do you see that is different?
Well, like I said before, there is a lot more individual concern. There's less enthusiasm with each other's events and accomplishments. We've had some anger and tears when girls do not want to compete in an event that my assistants or I have put them in. I guess a lot less cooperation than last year.
Great. So that is an area we know we'll need to work on.
So how long is each session, and how often do they need to be done?
The initial session is around 45 minutes, and it depends on the needs of the client. Typically, I will start off meeting with the client 2 to 3 times a week and add or subtract the number of sessions later on, depending on their need.
Is every session the same?
No, the initial session is used to get to know the athlete and for them to become comfortable with me and my routine.
So what's the best way for me to introduce the process to my athletes?
I would speak to your assistants, and once you're all on the same page, come up with a game plan together. It's important for them to realize that this is not happening because of a weakness or a negative event.
So once we are in competition season, do schedules vary?
Yes, they may. Once I've met with clients for a few months, I may feel comfortable giving them at-home skills training. This will allow the athlete to work on skills during their own time outside of our sessions.
Okay, I see.
I would like to make you aware of some areas that I'm a stickler on. First, confidentiality is very important in my practice, and I feel that the athlete's confidentiality is of the utmost importance.
Yes, our athletic trainer is really firm on that as well.
Unless the athlete shares information that may be harmful to them or another individual, I am not at liberty to share this information with you or your assistants.
Is there ever an instance that this would be different?
Of course. In my first session with clients, I discuss the limits of my services and clarify that everyone fully understands. Confidentiality is a main area discussed with the athlete and their parent because of their minors. We review the guidelines and I have them sign a consent form where they may agree to have coaches or another individual involved in their care. Without this consent, I'm not able to share information.
So do parents have access to this information or no?
Yes, due to them being minors, parents have access to all information and decide along with the athlete who has access to their care.
What about the athletic trainer?
The athletic trainer and your team physician are members of my care team. We will work together to determine what care is needed for the athlete.
Are there any other people who are members of the team?
Each of us have other members within our own network that we may work with previously or are familiar with their services. As far as your athletes are concerned, the three of us will work together to treat within our standard of care. If there happens to be an athlete or situation that falls outside of our level of care, then we can work together to refer the athlete out.
How does that work?
Well, referrals are dependent on each individual athlete and their situation. I would first discuss with my care team and gather their thoughts on the situation. We can make a game plan for the athlete and determine what area of services they require. From there, a list of referral sources will be created, and I'll sit down with the athlete and their parents to discuss options. It is important for the individuals to know that this is not an abandonment, but they may require more than the services I can provide.
So would that be the end of your services with the athlete?
If able, I would continue working with the individual in any way possible by being a supportive representative in their care. I would make sure they are comfortable with my referral and understand the meaning behind it.
This session was very informative, and I appreciate you taking the time to meet with me.
I hope my services can be of use to you and your team.
I will definitely need to discuss with my assistants, but I feel that we can do a trial with a few athletes this season.
That would be great. They can get a feel for how my program works and hopefully gain insight to pass along to their teammates. This is going to be a marathon, not a sprint.
Thank you.